Nigeria's currency, the naira, has plummeted in value, and there's no easy fix in sight. Here's why. A huge part of the problem is the confusion caused by having multiple exchange rates. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer, but plunging prices of crude in 2014 caused an economic squeeze. Rather than devalue the naira, Nigeria's central bank implemented a new exchange rate system for government transactions that was pegged to the dollar, and a weaker market-determined rate for investors and exporters. The thinking was that the new system would encourage liquidity and improve dollar flows, but it failed to deliver. Now, pent-up demand for dollars led to the emergence of a black market that valued the naira at less than the official rate. All of this made it hard for businesses to plan and budget, and gave rise to widespread currency speculation. The IMF and the World Bank both demanded that things had to change. In June, the central bank announced that the naira would trade freely until it found a new market-related level. But the gap between the official rate and the black market continued to expand. Now, this week, the central bank effectively allowed another devaluation after changes in how the official rate is set. The shift delivered a 31% drop in the naira against the dollar, bringing it closer to where the currency trades in the unofficial market.
There is something happening in Nigeria with the USA, with the dollars. And Nigeria's relationship with the US dollar is more than a currency issue. It is a question of power. And right now, the stories that's coming online that that Nigeria has less dollars, and that's why I decided to speak about this issue. As here in New Africa, we need to see what is happening and what is the issue between Trump and Nigeria. As I said, the dollar or the currency issue, it's about power, it's about control and future direction for decades. Nigeria's economy has been tied to the dollar through oil exports, imports, and global trade systems for decades, And this dependency makes this country of Nigeria vulnerable to decisions made outside Africa, When Nigeria struggles to access dollars, the impact is immediate. Prices rise, like what's happening right now. The naira weakens. Right now, 1 naira is like $900. Is like 900 naira is like $0.68, if I'm not wrong. It is weakening. Business is suffering in Nigeria right now, and ordinary people, they feel the pressure. So this is not because Nigeria lacks talent. Nigeria has a lot of resources. It's not because they lack resources. But it is because the global system is designed to favor dollar holders. Now, the idea that Nigeria could break this dependency, because I have that idea. I'm thinking of that. Trump is in fear. If Nigeria break this dependency, what will happen? Because trust me, Nigeria has a lot of talent. Nigeria has a lot of resources. If Nigeria breaks this dollar dependency, something will happen. And they can only do this by strengthening local production, by expanding Africa to Africa trade, not depending on outside. They can only do this by diversing exports and reducing dollar reliance. It will represent a major shift. Now, a Nigeria that controls more of its own economic destiny would be less exposed to external pressure and more confident on the global stage. And this is where discomfort emerges abroad right now. A strong, economical, independent Nigeria will challenge long-standing power dynamics that rely on African independence. It will inspire other African nations to rethink their relationship with the dollar and the global financial order. And that's why I'm so happy when I hear discussions like Ibrahim Traore, the Sahel state, saying that they are creating their own currency. Most of the Western countries, the Sahel region, they were going down and down and down every day just because they depended on CFA franc. And CFA franc was controlling. You need to be in good terms with CFA franc for you to go on well. The same thing is happening in Nigeria.
Nigeria is going to be in a big problem. Why? because the 2023 budget, for which Nigeria depends to survive on next year, is hinged on an exchange rate of 435 naira to a dollar, and interest rate, inflation fixed at 17% per annum. As we speak, inflation continues to rise. As you all know, prices of goods and commodities continues to increase. The naira continues to slide against the dollar. So what it will mean is that you will find your federal government going to the National Assembly to apply for supplementary budget, even before the budget is implemented beginning from 1st of January. This is just November 4th. What can we learn from what happened earlier in the year? Recall that Russia invaded Ukraine in February, and by March, US and the European Union began to sanction Russia. What it did to the Russian ruble, which is their currency, is that it collapsed to a very low 139 rubles to $1. 4 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, the Russian central bank moved in, raising interest rate by more than double, from 9.5% to 20%. They did a whole lot of other things, but you know something? By June, the Russian ruble was exchanging for 52 rubles to $1, making it the best performing currency around the world as at then. Now, sanctions came such that restrictions were made. Most US and European countries were not now dealing with Russia anymore. What did Russia do? They went ahead to have new allies and continue to sell their products. India was an ally, China was an ally, collecting a lot of Russian oil. Now, because of the restriction of the United States, Russia also decided that they were not going to sell their oil in US dollars. So they decided to sell in Russian rubles. Suddenly, the ruble began to gallop. And that was how the ruble became so strong, the central bank became scared and said that the currency is becoming too strong and they cannot compete internationally with their exports. So they began to find a way to weaken the ruble again. And so they reduced interest rate 3 times to around 11% by May 2022. What can Nigeria learn from this? Russia continues to sell oil. Listen, in the first 100 days of Russia invading Ukraine, because of the high cost of oil occasioned by the war that started, Russia raked in $98 billion of oil revenue from fossil fuel exports alone. And out of that 98 billion, 60 billion came from the European Union, who is also sanctioning Russia. You see, you become so relevant that even your enemies cannot do without you. Why? For instance, as much as they keep restricting Europe from buying Russian energy, listen, there is a ban now on Russian energy by Europe. By December, it will take full effect. But even that ban cannot be implemented 100%. Why? There are some landlocked nations in Europe. Slovenia and Hungary are landlocked. They cannot have access to seaports from when they can have alternative suppliers of oil. It is only the Russian oil and gas pipelines that flows into those places. And so they will keep depending on Russia for their energy needs. This is how Nigeria can learn from Russia. There is also restrictions of capital flight. It became more difficult to move foreign exchange out of Russia because when they sanction you from dealing with other nations, then you have to find a way to deal with yourself. And that was how Russia. Now, what Nigeria is doing is to restrict movement of foreign exchange out of the economy without a commensurate inflow of forex into the economy. We have a vast land, agricultural land that we can tap into to use to do agricultural commodities, export and flood the entire markets out there, including selling our oil. We have a 2 million barrel per day quota, which we are not able to meet even 50% of because of oil theft and all manner of things going on in our oil industry. We can learn from Russia and stop the slide of the naira.
They are being forced to be in good terms with the dollars so that they can do their business well. So this is not a story about confrontation or hostility. It's about possibility. It's about Africa's largest economic beginning to imagine a future where its growth is driven internally. And I could be so happy when Nigeria starts building its own. You know, that's what I think. So there's a pressure that's going on right now. And I say this, Trump fears what Nigeria could become if it breaks the dollar chain. That's what I think, according to me. That's what I think, according to me. The dollar chain is not conspiracy or a secret. It's a structural. The global economic is organized around the dominant currency. The US dollar, that's the dominant currency. Oil is priced in dollars. International debt is designed or is paid in dollars. Global trade settlement, the reserves and the credit ratings revolve just around dollars. Now, right now, dollar is less in Nigeria. Something is happening. Now, when all these things are being paid in dollars, for Nigeria, this means that something very specific. Nigeria earns dollars mainly through oil exports. Nigeria spends dollars on imports. They pay debts on dollars. You know, Nigeria store value in dollars. Nigeria borrows in dollars. And this creates a circle where Nigeria must constantly chase dollars just to function normally. It is bad. No, they're just chasing dollars. You know? And that chases the chain that I'm talking about. When dollars are scarce, everything tightens. Now, right now, Nigeria is on fire. The Naira is weakened, inflation has rise, the businesses are struggling. Citizens, they feel immediate pain, not because Nigeria failed, but because the system demands constant dollar access to survive. You see? And just for those who are asking, why don't they ditch the dollars? I'll say this. Nigeria did not choose the dollar system freely. Like many African countries, Nigeria entered the global economic under conditions shaped by colonial extractions, the external debt structures, post-colonial trade imbalance. And the results was an economic designed to export raw materials and import finished goods, almost always priced in dollar. Okay? Oil became Nigeria's main dollar earner, but oil dependency came with consequences. It came with volatility, it came with external pricing, it came with exposure to foreign monetary decisions. And when oil prices fall, dollar inflows collapses. When global interest rates rise, debt costs explode. When foreign investors pull out, reserves drain instantly. And this is not just poor management alone. This is a structural vulnerability. You know, the dollar is not just currency, it's a leverage. The dollar is not just money, it is leverage. Countries that control the dominant currency, they influence global trade, they shape financial rule, they reward compliance quietly. And this is why power today is exercised less through armies and more through financial access. That's why you see sanctions. Right now they don't bring armies to your countries to, no, they do it with a financial war. So when Nigeria struggles to access dollar, imports suffer. Bank tighten, the prices rise, the public anger grows. Okay? Now, no missiles are launched in Nigeria, no statements are needed, the pressure is automatic. And this is why breaking the dollar chain is not a symbolic act. It is a strategic transformation. Nigeria needs to break this one. Not Nigeria alone, but today I'm talking about Nigeria because it's a symbolic, it's a very gigantic country. So it is symbolic. And Nigeria potential is very different. Why? The reason I'm giving an example of Nigeria is not just another country. Nigeria has over 200 million people. 200 million people. Nigeria has a massive youth population. Nigeria has a strategic geographic position. Okay? So if Nigeria begins to trade more within Africa, if Nigeria strengthens regional currencies, if Nigeria prize more trade outside the dollar, If Nigeria reduce import dependency, then Nigeria does something far more dangerous than protest. Okay? It will demonstrate an alternative. And alternative are what the system fears the most. A Nigeria less dependence on the dollar will mean what? Will mean less external leverage? Will mean increased African coordination? Will mean stronger regional leadership and more policy independence? It will encourage other African countries to ask questions, like why must our trade pass through foreign currencies? Why don't we just do business with our own currency? They come, we change with our own currency. That's what we need to do. And that's why what Libya was doing back then before they unalive Muammar Gaddafi, So sometimes I say it is important. It's not about hostility. It's not about hating America or opposing the West or, creating enemies, but it's about self-definition. Africa is our time. We need to change these things. Every nation that becomes strong eventually seeks economic sovereignty, monetary sovereignty, and internal resilience, the stability. And Nigeria seeking this is not aggression. It is maturity. It needs to do that. Africa needs to tell its own story. And right now, for too long, African economic story has been narrated as dependency, self-driven, and permanent and stable. But a Nigeria that rethinks the dollar narrative rewrites the story. A shift from can Africa survive without the West to what does Africa become when it builds from within? When you talk about these things, we cannot end this conversation without talking about oil, debt, and mechanics of dependency. Trump fears what Nigeria could become if it breaks the dollar chain. And when I talk about oil, this is the gift that was given to Nigeria. And this gift has become a trap. Why? Oil was supposed to be Nigerians' blessings. But when crude oil was discovered in commercial quantities, it promised revenue, development, global reverence. And for a time, it delivered dollars. But oil also locked Nigeria deeper into the dollar system. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Oil does not free countries. Oil blinds countries. Why? Because oil is priced in dollars. Oil is sold on a global market Nigeria does not control. So Nigeria earns dollars from oil, yes, but it also becomes dependent on oil to earn dollars. You get that? So when oil production drops, when price fall, or when theft increases, the entire economic feels it instantly. And this is not economic stability. It is financial fragility disguised as wealth. I was going across my social media account and I was seeing all this happening and I'm like, Africa, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? Debt always controls policy without commands. It controls the credit rating, investor confidence, market reaction. And when Nigeria considers policies that increase local spending or protect domestic industries, the question also always comes, how will market react? And that question is the leash. Because markets are not neutral, they are dominated by dollar-based institutions. And this is how independence is limited without laws being passed. You get that? Now, the Naira, a mirror of the system. Okay, but the Naira, let me talk a little bit of Naira. It's often blamed, but the Naira is not weak because Nigeria lacks productivity. The Naira is weak because it is forced to compete against a global currency backed by military, a global currency backed by financial and institutional power. And when Nigeria liberalized its foreign exchange policies, dollar demand surged. Capital exited faster, and the market did not become free. It became exposed. So the Naira reflects the structure it exists within, not the intelligence of its people. You see? Allow me to finish by saying this. Dependency is not accidental. There's someone who is benefiting from this dependency of Nigeria. And those who are benefiting, including import-dependent elites, global finance institution, currency speculators. A weak naira make Nigeria labor cheap. People, the Nigerians are going to work in a cheap labor, you know. A weak naira makes Nigerian asset affordable to outsiders. Just you come with few dollars, you know what I mean? It makes imports dominant. It keeps value extraction easy. And this is why breaking the dollar chain face resistance internally and extremity. But Nigeria have to break this. They have. And the reason why Nigeria can't reform its way out just quickly is because they are told to fix the corruption, to improve governance. That's not the issue. That's not enough. You cannot reform your way out of a structural imbalance as long as exports are raw, debt is foreign, and trade is dollar-based. No. Nigeria will remain vulnerable no matter who is in power. And this is why the conversation must move from management to transformation. And that idea is very alarming. Nigeria breaking the dollar chain is very alarming. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Until next episode, peace out.